Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, an intro to a tool that will revolutionize your knife grinding. I mean, maybe. Okay, so if you've been watching my channel for the last few months, you've probably seen me talking maybe ad nauseum about this little tool right here. It is a grinding jig that I call the Sorrells Brick. Anyway, today's video is going to be a little bit different from most that I do. What I'm basically doing is, this is going to be kind of an instruction manual for this brick. If you've seen one of my videos about this tool in the past month, this covers a lot of the same material, so forgive me if you've already seen this stuff. But basically, the tool is a bevel grinding jig. If you buy the tool, there's a little QR code in the box, that's going to link to the video that explains how it works, and that's what this video is. Anyway, if you stick around to the end of the video, we'll get to a couple of little interesting secrets about this tool and answer a bunch of your questions. All right, let's get on to the main purpose of this, which is the instruction video for this tool. Hey, Walter Sorrells here today with an introduction of the Sorrells Brick that you've just purchased. Now, in case you've never used a grinding jig, I'm going to start out with some preliminaries, just some real basic stuff about how jigs work. This is not the first jig in the world. There's some interesting aspects to it, but jigs have been around for a long time, so let's talk about them. Once I get done with that, I'll get onto the specifics of this jig and how to get more out of it. So if you already are very familiar with jigs, go ahead and skip on to that. And finally, we're going to wrap up by answering some questions about the Sorrells Brick. Now, the basic idea of a grinding jig is that it allows you to hold a knife in a fixed position so that you can grind a consistent bevel. That's all there is to it. Goes in here like this and holds it in a fixed position as the jig rests on your work table. Now, why is this important? Well, if you look down the length of any properly made knife, you'll see that the bevel, the angle of that blade, is exactly the same from stem to stern. And once you do that, once you grind that exactly at the same angle the whole way, all these other things happen. You get a properly ground plunge line, you get consistent edge thickness, and you get a nice little grind line along the top. But all that happens because you got that bevel angle consistent all the way across the knife. Now, it sounds easy, but it's actually one of the most high skill aspects of making a knife. It's just not easy to do. So a jig helps you grind that angle consistently, meaning that it decreases the amount of skill and therefore the length of the learning curve that it takes to get a decently ground knife. So there have been adjustable jigs out there for years. So the idea of the Sorrells Brick is just that you only have 4 fixed angles, and by taking away the adjustability, you get a simpler, easier to use, and a little bit more affordable tool. So here on the Sorrells Brick, you've got a 3, a 4, a 5, and then a 7-degree side. And those cover most, medium-sized type knives. Now, one thing I want to stress is that these are just approximate angles. This is a rough and ready type of tool, and these are just rough and ready angles. The point is not that they're exact, but they're repeatable. So every time you put a knife in here and you put the jig on your tool, it's going to give you the same angle. Knife after knife after knife, you set it down, you pick it up, it's going to be the same thing. Okay, so let's get down to business and show you how it works. It's very simple. Now, you're starting with a knife blank that's already been profiled. You're going to place the blade in one of these 4 little shelves and rest it against there. And as long as it's resting there and flat on the work table, you've got that angle set. We'll talk a little bit more about why you might choose a particular angle later in the video. But once you've got it resting on this little ledge, and you can see it's not falling out right now, then you're ready to grind. Now, first point about using the grinding jig, you got to have a work table on your grinder. Some grinders don't have a work table. If you don't have a work table on your grinder, this will not work. but almost all decent grinders do have some form of work table. Now, before we talk about that, it's obviously important that the blade doesn't shift around while you're grinding. If it's sliding up and down or falling off of here, you're not going to maintain that angle. So there's several ways to hold it here. First one is to use a welder's clamp. You can buy them at Harbor Freight for $1.29 or whatever, or you can splurge and buy the $4 ones at Home Depot, but it's a real cheap and simple option. Or you can use a C-clamp. There are other kinds of clamps that you could use. Can't twist clamps and whatever, but I'll tell you, this is the way I typically do it. It's called a manual clamp. It's just right there. You see the clamp, it's my fingers. You just hold it firmly there, and believe it or not, it actually just sits right there. Now, the disadvantage of doing it by hand is that if you're not careful, it can slide off of this little shelf. It's not going to do that while you're holding on to it, but sometimes between operations you won't notice and it'll drop off. So it's just one thing that you have to keep an eye out for as you're grinding if you're just going to use your hands. So once you're there, you've got it on your work table, you just want to apply pressure and you start grinding. Now, just as with freehand grinding, you want to keep the blade moving, running it slowly and steadily across the face of the platen. Now, personally, I like to start with a 36 grit ceramic and work my way up to higher grits, but you know, some people like to start with a 60 or an 80. There's no right answer here. And it's not a bad choice if you're just starting out in grinding to start with a little bit of a higher grit. You can make mistakes very quickly with 36 grit. From there, you'll just proceed from grit to grit until you achieve a finish you like. I typically go up to 120 grit ceramic, then turn to structured abrasives like the 3M Gator Grit or VSM structured abrasives. But there are tons of options at that point. Pro tip, unless you're grinding a really broad knife or something like a Santoku that drops way down towards the cutting edge, you want to hang the tip like so off of the end of the brick. If you don't, you'll end up grinding into this corner of the brick, and you want to avoid doing that. So I've established my grind. Now, how far up the blade toward the spine should I grind? In other words, how far does that bevel travel up towards the top here? Well, fact is, it's up to you. The higher up you grind, the better it's going to cut. The lower that grind is, in other words, the wider that unground section is, the sturdier the knife's going to be. So it's sort of an engineering optimization thing as to what you want out of this knife. Pro tip, look, once you get started with the brick, you don't have to keep using it to the bitter end. For some makers, particularly if you're a little more experienced, you might want to use the brick just to hog off some material and establish a nice clean grind or a nice clean flat. Then you can start freehand grinding to tune that angle a little bit. There's nothing sacred about these 4 angles, so once you've got a jump on things, you've got a nice flat established there, you want to maybe fine tune it and move it one way or the other towards something that's perfect for this knife. Another pro tip, again, if you're new to this, when I'm grinding, especially on longer knives, I'll often focus on the main part of the grind. That's this section right here. This is a pretty short knife, but if you're going to grind all the way out to the tip, a lot of times I'll just grind straight, and then I'll worry about the tip at the end. It's easy to overgrind if you're not careful. So saving that tip to the end allows you to sort of fine tune it and be careful about it. Another pro tip, I like changing the knife from side to side as I grind. That allows you to assure yourself that the blade's symmetrical from side to side. And you know, that's one of the nice hidden advantages of this particular jig is that it's extremely easy to flip it from one side to the other. You don't have to loosen screws or clamps or anything. It just flip, and you're grinding away. All right, final grinding tip. You always want your grind line, that's the line up here, to echo the line here. In other words, you want it to be parallel so that if you measure with a set of calipers, you're going to find that the distance from here to here, here to here, here to here, at that point that it finally disappears off the top of the spine, that they're exactly the same. And if you do that, then you're also going to end up with an edge that is consistently thick from one end to the other. All right, one last point, and this is pretty important. No grinding jig is a magic bullet. If you're just getting started with knife making and you're having trouble getting a good grinding line, give yourself a little grace and be patient. Just recognize it's going to take you a while to get these things really beautiful and perfect. This will make it a lot faster, but it's not going to happen the first minute you put steel to abrasive. Like anything else, it takes practice and repetition. Hall of Famers didn't go out and throw a curveball perfectly the first time they did it. They had to practice. All right, let me answer some common questions about this tool. And if you stick around to the end, I'll solve the mystery of this little drilled and tapped hole. So first question, can you use this with longer knives, or are you limited to a particular length or knife size? The short answer, unfortunately, is kind of depends. You definitely aren't limited to any particular length. It's not like, okay, if it's over 11 inches that you can't do it on here. Anything in the 10-inch or shorter range is going to work fine, but you know, we've made chef's knives on here, and so it can work for wider, thinner, longer knives. It really just depends on, you know, where you're going to terminate your grind line. There are just a lot of factors at play. It's one of those things that you really just have to practice with it and, you know, figure out what's going to work for the kind of knives that you make. I will say, if you typically make camp knives, machetes, big old huge art knives, you know, giant bowies, things like that, this might not be the perfect tool for you. On that score, can you do scandies? Can you do chef's knives? Can you do paring knives? Look, the brick has fixed angles, and that is its limitation. There are going to be knives that don't work for it. So every difference in blade thickness, blade width, how far you're grinding up the blade, how thick the cutting edge is, all of that is going to be part of the equation. So there's just not a simple answer. But the bottom line is that you can do reasonably slim chef's knives in the, you know, on the 3-degree angle, and you can do fairly sizable thick knives on the 7-degree angle. But if you're making giant camp knives or super thin chef's knives or paring knives, you may hit the wall and not be able to do them. As a result, I've got a kitchen knife variation that's in the works. Haven't got it available yet. By the time you watch this video, it's possible it'll be there. That's going to have steeper angles. And to the same token, I've got a Scandi version in the works that has angles in the 11, 12 degree range that would be appropriate for Scandi grinding. By the time you watch, as I said, these may be available, but they're not available right now. Which raises the question, can you change angles as you go? Well, the answer is absolutely. If you're doing a knife design that you haven't tried before, you know, you may just have no idea what's going to be a good angle for it. So you're grinding on a knife, you've just chosen something at random, 5 degrees or whatever, and you find that you're not getting where you want to go, you're climbing too fast, or you're getting too close to the edge, one or the other. Just swap it out, switch to a shallower or deeper angle, and you know, just quickly you'll be able to establish a new flat on there, just, you know, a couple sweeps, and then that new angle is going to work for you. You just want to be nice and firm, take your time, so it doesn't get grabby and chattery while you're grinding your way through that facet, and then you're good to go. Another question that I've been asked innumerable times is if there are magnets available for the brick. So, you know, and the idea would be, you know, could you put magnets in each one of these faces so that, you know, you can put the knife on there and it just won't fall off. The first issue is, you know, I do want this to be an affordable tool, and the more stuff you add to it, the more it increases the manufacturing cost and the more you're going to have to pay for it. In addition to that, however, this is actually the functional reason and the most important reason that I haven't done anything with it yet. I'm still wrestling with the idea because it would be nice, but here's the problem. If you put magnets on all four faces, what happens is that as you are grinding, all that grinder dust starts to build up on these magnets. Now the ones on the back, so what? Doesn't make any difference. But the ones on the bottom, as you get buildup, it's going to decrease the stability, and more importantly, if there's enough crud under there, it's actually going to start to change the angle that you're grinding. And that, of course, kills the whole purpose of the tool. So something we're still wrestling with. At this point, no magnets available for this tool. Okay, so what about this hole? Simple. It has no functional purpose per se. See, the Sorrells brick is Cerakoted. To do that, you got to hang it up. So I put these little eye bolts in there and then hang them up in order to Cerakote them. So we hope you'll enjoy your Sorrells brick. Thanks for your patronage, and hopefully you'll get many years of knife making enjoyment out of that tool. Okay, so that wraps up the video. Like I said, this was done basically as an instruction manual for purchasers of the Sorrells brick. If you're interested in picking one up for yourself, check sorrellstool.com or your favorite knife supply house. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and keep on making those knives. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.